Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through the industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Teri Holland. She is a professional speaker, podcaster, high performance coach. Welcome to the show, Terry.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You are welcome. Welcome to the show. Welcome to India in this online form, Terry. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk right now. We'll talk about how one can break their limitations and achieve the success that they deserve or desire. In this backdrop, we'll have our conversation. But before that, let's understand a bit more about your journey or your background so that people know who they are listening to, how you broke your own limitations and achieved the success that you deserve so much.
Thank you. Yeah, it's definitely been a journey, that's for sure. Um, when I was growing up, I was very shy, very quiet. My parents called me Mouse because I was so quiet and I was afraid of my own voice. So every parent-teacher conference, the teacher would tell my parents, Terry needs to learn to speak up more in class. Now, at home, I had no problem talking with my family, with my sister, my parents. But if anyone else was around, I would become very small and disappear. And I never knew why I was like that. But that became a problem for me as I got older. Now, I found I was very lucky in the third grade that I was given a solo line in the school concert. That moment changed my life. I remember standing on the stage and stepping up to the mic, and I delivered my line. And I didn't have just any line, I had the punchline of a joke. And this little mouse got to make everyone in that auditorium laugh. And in that moment, I found personal power. And it took me several decades more to figure out how to use that in my day to day life. But I found that on stage, I could be very confident and very expressive because someone told me what to say and someone else told me where to stand. And so I was determined to become an actor because I felt safe on stage. But out in the world, I was still this shy, quiet little mouse who would just disappear in a group of people. And it wasn't until I learned neurolinguistic programming, or NLP, that I really began to discover my true confidence and to overcome those limitations that had been holding me back my whole life. And so that's what led me into the work that I do today. And everything that I do now involves speaking, ironically, even though I started my life being very afraid to speak.
Absolutely. Not ironically, you were a good speaker from very beginning. You used to speak at home, but you put some limitation on yourself. And that is where you discovered that if you are on the stage, you will be able to do things. Sometimes it happens. We do not know why it happens. I'm not an expert to know, but I can feel it. I have seen it. I can understand it. And in your case, you were never a mouse. You were always what you were, but you were able to overcome those hesitant situations that you, because you used to speak at home, and that anyone who speaks anywhere can speak anywhere else, and which you did. So I want to understand then, how did you overcome this? And many people are like this. Many people. Even I used to be, hesitant to ask questions in my school, in class, and then and it takes a bit of understanding to yourself to get that whole confidence about things. You are afraid of, that the world will laugh at you, the world will
Mhm.
look at it differently. They will think that, you will not be so smart. You are not so smart, even though. And those are the things we start building up. But you see, you are a podcaster. Even now, I am able to ask a few questions to my guests to be able to bring out that value from this. The world can change any moment. How did you change your world? Tell it, share it with our audience, please.
Yeah, it really goes back to when I first was introduced to NLP. Before I did all the things I do today, I was in personal training and I was a nutritionist. And I burnt out very, very badly. And I thought I would always be a personal trainer. I would always be a nutritionist. And I identified myself with those labels of what I did. And then suddenly I burned out and my doctor told me I could no longer do what I was doing. And I felt lost. And I think that's a big part of what limits us is we attach ourselves to these labels. I was a personal trainer. No, no, I did personal training. That was my career, not who I am. But I was identifying and making myself, making those labels more important than they were. So when that was taken away from me, I was completely lost. And I hired a coach to help me navigate and figure out what is my next step in life. And he introduced me to NLP and hypnotherapy and everything that I do today with my clients. So that was sort of the first step. And then going through that training, I learned a whole bunch of tools that really helped me. So tools that helped me identify why I had these limitations. And it wasn't just the speaking thing, and there were many limitations in my life. But it helped me start to identify why they were there, what the root cause of these limiting decisions were. And then I could begin to make new decisions. And I call them limiting decisions, not limiting beliefs, which a lot of people refer to them as limiting beliefs. But I call them limiting decisions because if you didn't decide it was true, how could you ever believe it? And so just even that little perspective shift of saying, I must have decided this at some point in my life. I decided I was a shy mouse. At some point, I decided that I couldn't have the money I wanted or the success I wanted. At some point, I had to decide it was true in order to believe it. And once we recognize that we can decide these things, we can recognize we can also undecide them and make new choices for our future.
Right, right, Terry. So you are a high performance coach,
Yeah.
and you talk about, building confidence and all those things. So I want to understand about personal limitations.
Hmm.
Uh, how do we create these personal limitations? Do we do it, or you talked about, limiting decisions? Who
Hmm.
does this? We do it on our own, or is it that some of the things that we pick from around us that lead us to creating this, personal limitations on us? Help us a bit about that mindset which creates these hurdles for us, so that people who listen to you will not do that to themselves. They will keep themselves in good stead.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So it's both of those things. So something happens. There's an event in your life, something happens. And it's the meaning that we attach to that moment that determines what we do next. So this is how you can have siblings, for example. They grow up in the exact same family, they experience the same events, and yet they'll interpret them in different ways and make different decisions based on them. So, yes, an event happens, something happens outside of your control, but what do you decide based on that? What do you decide is true about it? What's the story or the meaning that you attach to that event? That's what begins to form these limitations. And we all have them. There's not a single person on the planet who hasn't decided something in a moment that later limits their future. So we all make limiting decisions. None of us are immune to doing it. Um, but the important thing is that we can undo them. We can undecide that to make a new decision. So it's not that someone does this to us, it's what we decide in that moment. And the decision that you'll make of what that means to you or what you believe is true about it, it's based on where you are in that moment with the resources and the tools you have available. So none of this is to say that it's, your fault, you're to blame for how you are today. It's not about putting blame on yourself or shaming yourself, but recognizing in that moment, these were the resources that I had available. This was the best decision I could make at the time. But now, from this point in my life, I can see things differently and I can decide something new for myself.
Right, right. Now, in terms of confidence, how do
Mhm.
you start building that confidence? Does success build your confidence, or does your success, you know, uh, your confidence builds up that success for you? How does that work? What should one work on first?
Yeah, it's kind of like the chicken and the egg, isn't it? What comes first, the success or the confidence? And they really go hand in hand. So, what I teach my clients to do is to set themselves up for small wins. So, if you're struggling with confidence right now, then set yourself up to win at something every day. Whether that's you make the decision that starting today, I'm going to make my bed every morning, if that's something you don't already do. So you do that task and immediately you get a win to start your day. So you said you were going to do something, you followed through, you did it, and you set it up with something really small and achievable, like making your bed, or um, say you're going to go for a walk every morning to start your day, something that you know you can commit to and do. And then in the act of doing it, you're starting to build your confidence and your trust within yourself that, hey, I said I would do it. And then I followed through and I did it. And it gives us a sense of a win. You get a little bit of a dopamine hit that I achieved that thing, I did that. And that fuels a little bit more confidence. And so we build on that, start with something really small and do that for 30 days. And then add another new habit, something else you're going to commit to doing. Do that consistently for a while. Add something new, make it a little more challenging, a little bigger. And over time, all of these small wins begin to add up and begin to build our confidence.
Right, right. And in your case, what were the small, which you talk about? You are a professional speaker, podcaster, high performance coach, also
Yeah.
into acting and a theater background. All these things. How did you start? Did one thing lead to another, or you wanted to do all of these things and they just fell into place? Which gave you the biggest confidence in your life? Did that stage thing give you the biggest confidence, or was it other wins that came in later on?
I would say theater was a big part of it. And it started back, like I mentioned before, back in the third grade with that solo line in the show. And then the next year, I went for another part. And then I started taking some acting classes outside of school. And every time I would stand on stage and do something, my confidence would grow a little bit more that I could do this. What I really struggled with was the confidence outside of the theater, off stage. And that was where I found Toastmasters. So I knew I wanted to be a professional speaker. I loved listening to professional speakers. And I had this idea that one day I wanted to be on stage speaking. But it was scary because no longer would someone else tell me what to do or what to say. I would have to come up with my own material and I would have to stand there as me, not a character. I couldn't hide behind a role as a speaker. So for me, it was joining Toastmasters and taking those little steps every week, going to the meetings, showing up, taking on a role, standing in front of my peers and speaking. And over time, it's a desensitization process. So over time, the fear started to get less and less, and my confidence started to grow more and more until I do what I do today. That's
Right.
really taking those little steps.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I want to understand from you, Terry. First, you called yourself that you were a bit shy in terms of speaking outside.
Yeah.
Then you talked about the stage. Then you started winning. And then later on came the imposter syndrome. If you
Mhm.
have covered the journey so well, how did this thing called imposter syndrome find some small crack to enter? It should not.
Yeah.
I want to understand why did it happen?
Yeah, that really came up after I started my podcast. That was just over 9 years ago now. Um, I started my podcast, Success in Mind, and when I started it, it was really just a creative piece for me. It was something a way for me to express myself, to have a bit of fun. I didn't think anyone would ever listen to it. And that's, most podcasters want a podcast because we want people to listen. I didn't think anyone would listen. It would just be something fun for me to do. And then about 2.5 weeks after I started, I was number one in self-help on iTunes, but only for a day. So I could handle it for a day. I thought it was a mistake. And then I was back down in the rankings again, and that felt a little better. But then a few months later, I hit number one again, and I stayed there for 10 days. And that's when the imposter syndrome set in. All of a sudden, I had these thoughts like, who am I to be speaking on this platform? And why are people listening to me? Why would they want to listen to me? I have nothing to say. I have nothing to share. They shouldn't listen to me. And I stopped for at least 6 months. I stopped my show. I didn't record anything. I didn't even look at it because this imposter syndrome. And even though I had built up my confidence in terms of speaking in front of audiences, those were smaller groups still that I was speaking in front of. Suddenly, there was this global audience listening to me. and sending me messages about my show and people wanting to be on my show. And I felt like it was too much, too big, too soon, and I wasn't ready and I couldn't handle it. So that was the imposter syndrome. And I think in terms of, going back to what you were saying of how did the imposter syndrome get in? I always picture us as being like onions, right? And as you peel back a layer, there's something else underneath. So as I was working through a lot of my own issues about confidence and speaking and being seen and heard, there was still another layer underneath just waiting to emerge at the right time, and that's what brought it out.
Right. But you were a speaker by that time, isn't it? And
Yeah.
if you knew that people in a stage setting in that atmosphere are ready to listen, didn't you counter it that in that podcast thing? That listen, if people are ready to listen to me in an auditorium or anywhere else, why will people not listen to me on a podcast? It's very obvious. How did you deal with your imposter syndrome then?
Oh, how did I deal with it? Well, you know, that really took a good friend of mine reaching out to me. So when I hadn't recorded my podcast for about 6 months, one of my closest friends reached out and he said, "Terry, where's your podcast?" And I said, "Oh, I've just been so busy." And he said, "No, you're not that busy. Where's your podcast?" And I said, "Well, I think I'm out of things to talk about." I said everything that I needed to say, and I think I'm done. And he said, "No, you have lots to say. Where's your podcast?" And then finally I told him the truth. I said, "Well, I got really scared. People were listening to me. I was seeing my name on the Apple charts above people that I listen to and look up to, and how I have no right to be there. I haven't earned my place. I shouldn't be there." And he said, "Okay, then you start recording again, but just for me." He said, "Terry, I need your podcast. So you record, but you're only talking to me. You're not talking to thousands of people out there in the world. You're just talking to your friend." And that's it. And that's what got me to slowly start coming back to it and to slowly start chipping away at the imposter syndrome, was that I imagined I'm just talking to my best friend right now. There's no one else listening, no one else is there. It's just him and I having a conversation, and that slowly I was able to work through it. But it took time. It was a big one to overcome, and it took some time. I mean, it helped that I have these NLP skills and that I can do some self hypnosis around it. Certainly helped, but it really took time and chipping away at it to finally conquer that imposter syndrome.
Right. And you see, your podcast name is Success in Mind.
Hmm.
But uh, so I'll come to this podcast, you know, but I want to understand it from your clients then. When you talk
Yeah.
about all these imposters, what do your clients come to you for? And how do you then tell them about things? I want to understand things from the ground.
Definitely. So one of the most common things they come to me for is imposter syndrome and confidence, overcoming limiting decisions that are holding them back from moving forward in business. But when they come to me with imposter syndrome, the the thing that I see over and over is that something happened. Usually it's in childhood, not always, but usually there was a moment in childhood where they did something or they said something and it was misinterpreted or misunderstood in a way that made them feel like they didn't have the right to speak up. So it's usually some kind of conflict earlier in life where maybe they said something in class and the teacher said, "No, that's wrong," or "That's a stupid question." And in that moment, they decided, "I can't use my voice." Or if I ask a question, I'm stupid, or I don't understand enough. I don't know enough. I'm not enough. And it's often these small little moments that when we look back, we think that's not that significant of a moment. But that little developing mind in that moment decided, "I can't use my voice," or "I shouldn't be heard right now." And from that, it starts to build into this imposter syndrome. And then you have an entrepreneur. I work mainly with entrepreneurs who wants to get on stage and speak at a conference, and they're terrified that people are going to judge them or ridicule them or think that they're stupid or they're not good enough to be there. But it usually starts with one small moment in childhood where somebody, a teacher or an authority figure, says the wrong thing at the wrong time. And that little unconscious mind decides, I'm not good enough to speak. I need to be quiet. I need to be small.
Right. So in those moments, one should look at the moments when somebody said you are not good enough, or one
Mhm.
should remember those moments when lot many people said you are very, very good. Is there does this in this fight? How can we make the positive feedback work for us and not the negative feedback?
Mhm.
Especially if negative feedback has been given long, long back, and positive feedback are the recent. Why are we not able to live in the now?
Well, our minds are wired to look for what's wrong and that's a survival skill. So our minds are wired to find the danger, the thing that's wrong, the thing that's bad, not to look at the positive. And so that takes a lot of work, a lot of conscious work on our parts to change our thinking, to be able to identify what is positive and to accept that positive feedback, to be able to hear it and receive it. So one of the, a quick tool that I can give you that I give to my clients is to question those limiting thoughts as they come up. So in the moment, if you have a thought of, who am I to do this? Or I'm not good enough to do this, question yourself. Well, is that true? Is it true that I'm not good enough? And where did I learn that? Where did I learn that I wasn't good enough? Did I learn that from a credible source? Can I trust that thought as being true? And if it's not true, what else could be true instead? So if I'm not good enough isn't true, and even if I still think it's true, in the moment I can ask myself, well, if it wasn't true, if I didn't believe that, what else would be true? Well, I could say that I'm capable of learning new things. Okay, so if that's true, can I find evidence in my life that I'm capable of learning new things? Well, yes, you can find thousands of examples in your life of when you've learned something new. Okay, so I can say then I have evidence that I can learn new things. So then is it true that I'm not good enough? Well, no, because I'm capable of learning new things. So I am good enough to learn. I can do new things. I can try something different. So that's just a questioning technique that I teach my clients to do in the moment to challenge those beliefs. So is this true? Where did I learn it? Can I trust the source I learned it from? And if it wasn't true, what would be true instead? Or what would I believe instead if that wasn't true? And then find the evidence to support that new belief.
Absolutely. And that brings me to your podcast, Success in Mind. What
Yeah.
does success in mind mean? I mean, how do we first, do we have to think success in mind and then achieve success on the ground?
Yeah, so that name just came to me. It used to be called The Empowered Life was the first name of the show, and then I changed it to the Teri Holland Show, and then about a year and a half ago, I changed it to Success in Mind because it came to me one morning and it wouldn't go away, and I thought that's the direction of the podcast now. So what that means is that all success begins in here. It's a mindset game. So if you can believe it in here, you can achieve it. However you see yourself in your mind is how you will continually show up in the world. It's how you'll behave. It's the results that you'll get in life. So until we work in here and change how you see yourself, change your self image and improve that, uh, it's going to be really hard to achieve what you want to achieve out in the ground in the real world.
Absolutely. There is much to learn from you about all these things, Terry. And,
Thank
and,
you.
and I'm sure a lot of people would want to connect with you, learn more from you, about your podcast, about that, about being your client. What's the best way for them to connect with you?
Oh, the best way would probably be through my website. It's teriholland.ca. And I always say it's Terry with one R and one I because no one ever spells it correctly. But teriholland.ca or on social media, anywhere on social media, I can be found at the Teri Holland.
Absolutely. And what about that mouse? Where is that mouse? Is it gone forever or will it be ever be found? How do you keep that mouse away from your life?
I don't think she's gone. I think she's grown up. So I like to think of her now as a mighty mouse, a strong mouse.
Absolutely. A strong mouse. I would not like to use the mouse word. I will only, a strong mouse is this mouse that I'm using it, computer mouse. Wonderful. Great. Nice talking to you, Terry, with this. it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.